Hi, everyone. Welcome back for another episode of Riftbound 101. This is episode 18, the first episode of 2026. So, Happy New Year to everybody. And what we have on the menu for today is talking about the Spiritforged Chaos Cards, which, if you've been taking a look at recent events, have been making quite a splash. And so, it's going to be an interesting way to kick off sort of this fifth episode of the set review, which has been evolving along as we've been starting to see events happening in China and some online events as well. So the plan for today is going to be to talk about these 2026 China City challenges. There are 8 this week instead of the 5 from last week. And then, as usual, I'm going to move through the Origins and Proving Grounds Chaos Legends, talk about kind of what the shells have been for decks so far, talk about the new Chaos Legends, and one in particular, and then evaluating these the cards that are coming into the field, along with the changes that we're seeing happening to the metagame. And then capping it off with my personal favorites, which is really the plan for today. So, the city challenges. So for this weekend, there were 8 city challenges that happened across like two days or so, 3 days, for a total of 730 players, which is we're starting to get close to like full-on regional qualifiers, nationals numbers. It's like about 2/3, 3/4 of that. So Zhongshan, Shanghai, Fuzhou, Tianjin, Zhushou, Yantai, Shenzhen, and Beijing. A couple of those topped out in terms of player count. So Shanghai, Fuzhou, and Shenzhen in particular at 128, which I'm pretty sure is like the maximum amount for non-RQ events due to how like the pairings work. Zhongshan might just be capped at 64 as well. So, you know, there might have been more players given different like event formats. And I'm going to show you some stats, and I really want to stress one thing. These events are best of 1 in the open field, so they tend to be best of 1 all the way up to top 8, which becomes best of 3. So a lot of these decks don't sideboard. They don't necessarily have choice of battlefield since you're randoming. So take everything with a grain of salt. I think one deck in particular seems to be doing it very well into a BO1 open field because it is more agnostic to deck type. But that doesn't mean that there won't be ways to hate on that deck or that there won't be significant shifts once we move to a best of 3 format. And if you look at something like the Rift and Runes tournaments, you're seeing some different kinds of decks pop up. Now, those are smaller events, they're online events, and there are always like national preferences and there's stages of a metagame. So aggressive decks out of the gate tend to always perform a little bit better because they can knock out decks that are slow or trying to find their footing or trying to find proper ratios for cards. So let's take a look. The first event got topped by Kaisa, and the runner-up was an Aurelia deck. And you can see already a couple of Dravens, which is like the spoiler. You're going to see a lot of purple-red on this list. Also Jinx and Annie in that top 8, and Sivir in the top 3. So still notable. Second event, Draven top, Draven third, Orin second, Aurelia, and Annie, a Kaisa, and an Ari, which, hell yeah, Annie, Ari. Third event, equal split between Dravens and Aurelias. Draven top and third, Aurelia runner-up. Next, Draven, Yi, Set, Kaisa, Aurelia, and then 3 Dravens. Then Draven, Kaisa, Annie, Draven, a Sivir for, I think, 5th. 5th or 6th, depending on how the match pairings worked out. Draven twice, and Yi. And then another batch of Dravens, Draven first and runner-up, Kaisa third, Yi, another Kaisa, and Fiora in the top 8, which I'm happy to see. And then maybe the most interesting of the events for me, which I think this is, it's not Beijing. I think this is Shenzhen. Fiora top, Victor second and third. And for people who have not been taking a look, I am like 90% sure that these are the spell Victor lists. I'll have, as usual, the event lists for all of these events in the video description below. 2 Dravens, 1 Rek'Sai, 1 Azir, which, hell yeah, Azir, managing to survive somewhat in this field. And finally, top 4 Draven, 2 Aurelia, 1 Ezreal, and Draven. And so what you're seeing out of China for this second weekend is a colossal decline of Kai'Sa decks and like a near total collapse of Yi decks. And really like the entrance into the field of Draven, which was already like placing fairly well. And we were looking at kind of like a semi-even split between Draven and Kai'Sa decks. Now it is just clear that like out of the gate, Draven is the top deck, at least in China and in VO1. Irelia is second, and Kai'Sa is third. And so there is kind of a split between red and purple as the dominant colors in the metagame. This is, if you look, these are the stats for like the top 8 of these events. And then if you narrow it down by moving up the ladder, top 4, you're going to notice decks like Azir and Ezreal kind of like drop out. Irelia and Kai'Sa, I think Kai'Sa retains. Kai'Sa actually gets a little bit of meta share. Irelia loses a little bit. Yi gains a little bit. And then Draven actually gains a little bit as well. So basically what this means is as you move from top 8 to top 4, Draven stays consistent, Kai'Sa gets a little bit better, and Aurelia actually starts dropping out. This is not like unexpected given that Kai'Sa decks are incredibly optimized. Obviously there are new versions now, including Pharaoh's Cavalier, but Aurelia is much less of an optimized deck, and in a BO1 field, things are a bit more unpredictable. Any noticeably very small in the metagame and shares colors with Draven. And yeah, Jinx is just like off the map at this point. And then if you look at the top, there things get way scarier for, I think, a lot of folks. 7 out of 8 events were topped by Draven and the final one by Kai'Sa. So you could argue 8 red decks, 7 purple decks, 1 blue deck are in the top. And the reason why I want to talk about these stats is because evidently I'm going to be ranking or discussing the applicability of purple legends and kind of what's been happening to them, what is going to be happening to them in the next month. And if you're somebody who is building up a collection, who's trying to get into the game, who's trying to figure out heroes that you like, these things matter to you, right? Like discussing these cards in a vacuum is certainly useful for competitive players. But this channel in general targets people who are interested in going to Nexus Nights and skirmishes. I think if you really want like pure competitive math, you could look at something like Challenger TCG, for example, or like Eggman's lists, and follow pro players directly for like cutting edge tech. But the likelihood of you seeing these decks at your local events and being piloted by like regular players or invested players is somewhat high. So with that in mind, let's talk about what Purple Legends have looked like so far. So obviously in the last couple of months of Origins, Annie has been on the rise and I think is kind of the quintessential purple hero that Purple Legend that people talk about. Darkchild's ability at the end of your turn, ready 2 runes, has meant that this deck gets to play with a lot of reactive open resources to cast spells, so things like Fight or Flight. And it's made any kind of an all-purpose deck where you get to play things like Sneaky Deckhand, you get to play Traveling Merchant, you get to have like Vi Ride the Wind combo, and you kind of sneak points, right? So this isn't like a quintessential aggro deck, nor is it like a control deck, or even a mid-range deck. It doesn't seek to trade, it seeks to just find profitable margins. I would equate this more to like a burn deck if we were in another game, but obviously the archetypes don't always map on super well. So a lot of like small units that you can sneak into battlefields, and then like you can top off from like 6 to 8 with unexpected or like hard to react to combos. And then the other 4 legends, I talked about MF last week. MF has sort of now become the de facto Aurora champion and really prioritizes cards like Gust or Stack Deck to find access to its orange cards. So finding Aurora, finding Sabotage, finding Bullet Time, or any of the cards that will like let you dig and ramp all the way to Aurora. Ganking, very good on big units that are usually slow and lumbering. So for example, like Aurora drops Dead Bloom Predator. Next turn you give it ganking, you move it to the next field. Or even something like a Mind Splitter that you can then like... well, I guess you're not riding the wind, but anyways. And a pretty good champ in the zone. Orange MF lets you sort of react to people who are going to close the game before you can get to Aurora. Teemo, really the home for hidden as an archetype. It's difficult to explain to people who haven't like been playing a lot of this game how much better paying one is over burning a rune. Burning a rune or recycling a rune late game, is fairly innocuous, but early on will like truly hamstring you. And so being able to play a lot of hidden cards early and not have to burn your resources is super useful. The second clause, putting a Teemo you own into its hand, is usually to reuse purple Teemo once he's been flipped up from hidden. Often this will like happen once or maybe twice a game, but it is really the first clause you're looking for. And Teemo is sort of slotted into like that, dark horse. Sometimes will like end up pretty high on tournaments. He unfortunately has. I should actually talk about this. MF and Teemo have like pretty catastrophic matchups into Draven. Draven, like Annie, pushes your units around a lot, and I'll talk about Draven and why that's profitable for him in a minute. But it makes Aurora much harder to play, and it certainly makes Hidden like really miserable to play in the current like metagame. And so I think like in terms of what they do, they've been like pretty unique, but they're kind of going to be losing out a little bit of space to that. Yasuo Unforgiven. I made a video about Yasuo a couple weeks back. I've been playing kind of a hybrid Yasuo Annulus to like decent success at local events. It's not my skirmish deck, but I'm having a ton of fun playing it. And Yasuo has sort of been a toolboxy deck that hasn't really found its footing in the current metagame. Loves moving units to and from base. So obviously loves things like the Merchant, which lets you discard and draw. Gives you access to a lot of like pseudo accelerate. Can do the like first player double push strategy where you play a 2-drop. Next turn you play another 2-drop. You move your first one into a battlefield and you use Yasuo's ability to push the second one, so you score twice. You probably give up a unit doing that, but then you like are forcing the opponent to react fairly aggressively, and you kind of get to run over a lot of the Aurora strats if you're doing that like well, and you get access to like green protection and cards like Gust. There are like more aggressive and less aggressive versions. I think Yasuo's about to be, I don't want to say power crept, but at least purple green just as a general combination is going to be more amenable to Aurelia for the time being. That being said, I think if you do want to play Yasuo, and you want to incorporate some of the tricks that are coming in through the Aurelia shell, you can probably run a very different, more like Protect the President style Yasuo deck going forward. It'll probably be not as great, but then you get to compete for like metal cards if you're going to RQs and stuff. And then Jinx, the second red-purple legend, beginning of your, at the start of your beginning phase, you draw an additional card if you have one or fewer cards in hand. I think Jinx has sort of never really found her footing in the metagame. She needs to play a lot of cards that will discard cards in order to draw, which means you're loading your deck with a lot of cards that are like not as good generically and require a lot of synergy. It's possible that someday she will be good, but she needs some like very specific, strong payoffs for discarding, which have not really existed up to now, and I don't really foresee them existing in Spiritforged. I think she only got like 2 cards, one being the Dunebreaker and one that I'll talk about today. And neither are, I think, enough to really make her competitive. And then we have the Spiritforged Chaos Legends. So I'm going to rip the Band-Aid off. I started the set reviews talking about Draven like a couple weeks back, and I was like, I think Draven's going to be good. He's definitely like got more room for card draw than Jinx. I severely underestimated how many scenarios you can actually draw with Draven in. He turns most push effects, if you're sitting on a battlefield, into like straight card draw, so cards like Fight or Flight or Rebuke or Gust. There are many ways as soon as a combat is declared to like effectively end it and force your opponent out of a battlefield and still be up a card. And so it is not impossible to draw sometimes 4 or 5 cards on your opponent's turn, which is really the thing that effectively makes like Jinx a non-hero. Jinx can sometimes draw an additional card on your turn. Draven will almost always draw a card on your turn and will often draw multiple on your turn and multiple on the opponent's turn. This is going to be like a nightmare for many decks to counter. And I sort of agree with the Challenger TCG, like discussion of Draven that you can find in the tier list video from a couple days back, which is just that like Draven effectively strangles most hold strategies from even existing in the game, which is pretty intense right now. I don't think the deck is without counters, see 39 Spell Victor, but it kind of punishes a lot of decks that want to just play for board and want to do fair things. So like green yellow decks, for example, have like no real good way of interacting with most of his cards. And even if you can counter spells, you need very specific tools. So with that in mind, talking about Irelia next. When you choose a friendly unit, you may exhaust me and pay 1 rune to ready it, and when you conquer, you can pay 1 to ready Irelia. I think Irelia's legend is pretty good. Often it'll let you use ganking units or even use things like Ride the Wind. Well, I guess Ride the Wind like readies you anyway. So like you ride something, it readies anyway, but then you can choose it with something else. And then if you're like in Hillock or if it has ganking, you can push it to another battlefield. Irelia kind of does a lot of the stuff that MF did, except instead of giving ganking, it gives you ready. And so if you can provide ganking from other sources, then you can like utilize those units in different ways. I think what does set Irelia apart, and I talked about it a bit in the Calm video a couple weeks back, is that she has amazing champion units compared to MF and Yasuo, and she has like a crazy signature spell. And so she enables like completely new strategies that I think Yasuo was sort of moving towards but couldn't like actually find. So like the super low unit count, like enormous amounts of protection deck is the Irelia deck. And it is a deck that can deal reasonably well with Draven. And I think will like tax your opponent severely by destroying their runes, which is kind of how you can get through Draven. So it's not surprising to see Irelia have like such a share of the Chinese city events. Then we have Ezreal Prodigal Explorer. Exhaust at reaction speed. You can draw 1 and use only if you've chosen enemy units or gear twice this turn with spells and or unit abilities. It's kind of hilarious to have Ezreal on the same screen as Draven and to look at Draven, who can draw multiple cards a turn without exhausting, and to look at Ezreal that needs to set up 1 draw. And then you can use it presumably like once during your turn, once during the opponent's turn. If you're using Hall of Legends, which is one of the new battlefields that gets to like unexhaust your legend, you get to use it twice at most. This card, like he's in a different color pair, so it's apples to oranges, but it is kind of striking how much more you need to invest. And if you are like countered, or if the opponent does not have like it is not really letting you get your game plan going, then Ezreal's going to feel like really bad. And then Battle Mistress Sivir, our new orange-purple champion. When you recycle a rune, you may exhaust me to play a gold gear token exhausted, and when 1 or more enemy units die, you may ready me. So Sivir effectively discounts half a rune off of everything. I always consider gold to be about half a rune, but sometimes it might be more depending on how your deck plays out. And you get to do that once a turn, and then if opponents' units are dying, then you can do it more. So you get to like effectively discount like half a rune off of most spells, or if you're dealing with a lot of gold, you can actually get to a point where You can recycle many of your runes and then hold up just enough to like power spells, and you can start paying with gold. So there's like a lot of micromanagement to do, and I think Sivir just like again suffers from being a bit more conditional than something like Annie, where you just get to have two runes open, and her units are a bit subpar, and her champion spell is like really not where it's at for me. So we'll talk about it in a minute, or like a little bit more. But she is unfortunately, I think, plagued by some inconsistency throughout her package, which is certainly not the case for Draven, and it's not the case for Irelia. And I should mention Ezreal has like a good to very good champion spell and like an amazing purple champion unit that is unfortunately played in Draven. So um, okay. So those are the legends, and really what you can notice is that like purple has always had a variety of effects, as long as you love moving units around. This time around, they're about winning combats, choosing your units, choosing enemy units, and also expending runes, which are all generically good activities. They're not like the Ornn or like the exhaust to add a rune kind of champions, but you're gonna get some good EV out of them for sure. Okay, so talking about the purple cards themselves. So this is where I start discussing these. As a reminder, this is all like generally speculative, and we are getting more data out of China, but evidently things will change once they hit NA and EU, and by the time we get to Bologna and Vegas, these like cards may have been evaluated quite differently. I'm reasonably confident in my predictions at this point, and you know, I would also recommend that you go watch other videos to get a sense of what other people are thinking. But like this is, thinking through like what these cards can bring to archetypes that already exist. Should you include them? Are they competitive? So first up, Black Market Broker, 3 might for 3 energy. When you play a card from face down, so you have to hide it, you can play a gold gear token exhausted. So this is a Teemo card. It's really like the place that you want to play this, because otherwise you're not getting enough reliable value out of it, and it becomes a 3 might for 3 vanilla, which is not good enough. The main problem is simply that Teemo has like an atrocious matchup into Draven. And so what this card is going to feel like often is you're playing against Draven. You would want to play this as a second player. So your opponent goes to a battlefield, you go to the other, you play a hidden card, and then your opponent fight or flights you. Like at the start of their next turn, or they rebuke you, and you have to play the card without like necessarily legal targets. You have to like turn it face up to get a gold gear token exhausted, which effectively recovers like half the cost of the card that you hid. If Teemo was in a good spot, this card might see some play. I don't think that Teemo is going to be in a good spot for the coming couple of weeks, unfortunately, and I think that this card is like plagued by some awkward timing, because whether you're second or your first player, you don't really get to play it early enough for it to really allow you to set up under opponents all that much. So I'm not really a fan of Black Market Broker. Called Shot is up next, 0 with 1 rune cost. It's an action speed and it has repeat for the same cost, and you can look at the top 2 cards of your main deck and draw one and recycle the other. Fantastic card. Called Shot is going to be played, I think, in a variety of purple decks for the foreseeable future. It is card fixing and card draw. It's 0 mana. In a lot of decks like Sivir, you actually get to like semi-refund that cost. And even in decks like Draven, you're going to be happy to play this to fix your draw. This is going to buttress colors that can't draw well. Orange, for example, has notoriously like not been able to draw very well, but even decks that lean away from green and away from blue are going to enjoy this a lot, and I think it's going to have like wide range applicability. Draven lists are already running this in varying amounts, but often in 3s, so I'm happy, telling you like Call Shot is a good investment. It's one of the many commons that purple got that I think are very good, and you can like reliably look at this. Obviously, like playing this early and burning a rune is pretty rough, but sometimes you're gonna be happy doing it. And late game, when you're pushing like 8, 10, 12 runes and you don't need them, burning 2 runes to look at the top 4 cards, or like the top 2 that you can draw both. It's like consecutive actions, right? So you're looking at two, you draw one, you can keep the other one. Oh no, you can't. You have to recycle it. So you pick the best of two, and then you pick the best of two. It's not like Scry 2 in Magic, which is a bit more permissive, but I'm still happy to like look at the top 4 cards in my deck and pick the 2 best cards. Well, the best of the first 2 and the best of the second 2. Up next, we have Corrupt Enforcer, 4 might for 3 energy, 1 rune. When I move to a battlefield, discard 1. When I win a combat, draw 1. So this is kind of like a hybrid Jinx Draven card. Draven has the when I win a combat, draw. The problem is that energy cost is weird. It's not like it's not good early on. 3 energy is an awkward cost. It would mean that you would want to go second, which is rarely what you want to do in this game at the current, as we currently stand. And playing this second, it's like you're leaving 1 rune up. It's like weirdly costed. Moving it fast is a bit tough. Like one of the things that makes something like Traveling Merchant good is that he gets his discard and draw on move, not on combat win. So it's less conditional. It doesn't cost you a rune. This card is like a card that Draven just doesn't want, and it's discard tech for Jinx that is not good enough to like do anything for her really. So I think Corrupt Enforcer is like a pretty bad card. Doran's Ring, 1 energy, 1 rune to equip, +1 might. When I conquer, discard 1 and then draw 1. This is like fine. It's another one of those like very cheap equipments. Discarding and drawing and getting that extra might is not inconsequential. I think the only thing is that most purple decks that I've seen would just prefer spells over gear right now. The champions that interact like profitably with gear are all attached to green, and Aurelia is not really like, I suppose you're choosing when you attach this to a unit, but I'm not like super in on, I don't know, like what you play like Merchant, your second player, you play Merchant, you play this, you equip it, then you can like burn another rune to like ready the Merchant and push in to discard 2 and then draw 2, get a point, but you're down 2 runes. Like, if there's ever a hero that or a legend that really wants equipment or wants might specifically, that is good, that is like not blue Ezreal, then maybe this will see a bit of play, but I'm kind of skeptical about it right now. Then we have Fate Porter, 4 might for 4 energy. When I move to a battlefield, you may pay 1 to move a unit you control to the same battlefield. So it gives like pseudo accelerate to not itself. 4 might is reasonable. 4 energy is like 4 for 4 is fine. Generally, this is like one of the costs that you like because it's over Hex Tech and 1 tick of Falling Star. It's not over Void Seeker, which is somewhat important. The problem with this is you're likely to like, you have to like play this and then play another unit on 6, which means you're not doing anything with this unit on 4. I would rather have like cheaper units that I play earlier and then move into battlefields, or like much bigger units than this, unfortunately. So not a big fan. If there's ever like a 2-unit archetype, maybe, but so far not really feeling it. Loyal Pup. When you depend at a battlefield, you may move me there. 3 for 3. So, okay, we have to put into context. Right now, defending and being at battlefields is incredibly bad because of Draven. Generally, like, Draven wants you to be there so he can fight you and draw cards off of you. So anything that is, focused on defense is actually, like, really struggling. And so, especially, like, purple, your reasonable, like places to play this are, like, a holding pattern Draven or Annie, and I think you would just like rather this be a spell in your hand otherwise. Very cute. I loved Puffcat Pup in Runeterra, but unfortunately the Loyal Pup is not as core here as he was there, and he certainly is not super synergistic with Hidden at all. Master Bingwen. 6 might for 6 energy and has Weapon Master. I think I've talked about like Weapon Master vanilla units a lot in the last couple of videos. Not a fan. You want cheap units that wear weapons well. Master Bingwen is not that. Playing this late game with a big equipment is not super interesting to me, and there are cards that I would much rather have over him. There also is like no particular reason to be in purple equipments all that much. There's like one that we'll talk about, but otherwise I'm not super inspired by this. Overzealous Fan, on the other hand, I am a big fan of. 2 might, 2 energy. When I defend, you may kill me to move an attacking unit to base. So this is effectively like a spell that gets to a point. You do have to defend with him, so he is much better when you're first player than when you're not. But even when you are not, if you ever like set foot on a battlefield and you have him and so there are a couple scenarios you can think through Overzealous Fan, right? You play him first, you move him to a battlefield, you get a point, your opponent tries to push in. Either they match you and you do nothing, or they have to commit more, and then you can just kill him to push them back. He effectively like always forces weird trades out of your opponents, and you can use him to push back like much bigger units. He's kind of like a pseudo stun, except that he can also like break some really messed up math for your opponent. He trades profitably into like Cleave Draven or Vi Ride the Wind. Overzealous Fan is like an all-star. He's one of the best 2-drops the game has produced, and the only reason why he's not the best 2-drop in this set is because there's another 2-drop that's like 2 cards away. So Overzealous Fan, you definitely want to play this in Draven, but I'm pretty sure you're going to want to play this in a lot of purple decks to just push back units, for sure. Temptation, spell at neutral speed, not action or reaction. 2 energy with a repeat, and then you can move an enemy unit to a location where there's a unit with the same controller. So you're going to use this sometimes to push units back in base or to move them sideways into different battlefields, so that you can like forcibly, like, I don't know, ride the wind into a battlefield that has like 2 units or something. Temptation's fine. The problem is it's just competing with a lot of better cards that can do its effects and provide you with some more flexibility or bodies. So Overzealous Fan, Rebuke, and Fight or Flight, I think, are fighting for the same slots, and you would rather like 3 of those cards before you ever have Temptation. If there's ever a reason why you specifically want spells, and especially like neutral speed spells, this might see a bit more play. And having Repeat does give it some flexibility where you can like effectively like empty out a battlefield. But I'm not a big fan. Also, remember that repeat costs, like if you play Temptation and you pay its repeat and somebody counters it, it actually counters both instances of the spell, which is pretty bad. And they don't have to counter the spell as though it was a 4 cost, they counter it as though it's the 2 cost. So this gets defied, it gets not so fast, it gets hit by like a lot of things that I would rather not get hit by. Things that like Overzealous Fan does not, for example. Then we have Treasure Hunter. So Treasure Hunter is 1 might for 2 energy. When I move, play a gold gear token exhausted. This is like a slow clap. If you thought watching the Merchant draw cards was obnoxious, this thing will get moved around by Yasuo and Aurelia and Draven and Annie consistently. It will produce so much gold. This effectively allows you to cheat part of Kai'Sa's ability onto a purple deck, which is partially why I think the purple decks are doing so well right now, and also will allow you to play a different suite of spells that Annie doesn't necessarily need to play, which is why you're seeing a lot more Draven. This card is core in basically everything that isn't like a super Voltron, like build 1 unit style deck, which Aurelia sometimes is, and the builds are moving around. Not every list I've seen of Draven plays this card, but many play it, and if they do, they play it as 3 of. As somebody who plays Yasuo, I will play 3 of this forever. This card is crazy, and it having 1 might is functionally meaningless most of the time because you are like getting resources to play cards to protect it, or you were never intending to protect it in the first place, or you can move it back to base with a variety of effects. So like, I don't know, flashing this back to base is crazy. if you are using Yasuo and then you push it into a battle, you like move it into a battlefield and then push it back, you can score a point and get like two gold in the same turn. This card is obnoxiously good, and yes, it dies to like literally every piece of removal in the game, but the fact that it demands that kind of piece, that kind of removal, or it risks just running away with the game is crazy. Like there are games where you're going to be playing against Master Yi, and if they're not on both battlefields, you can like produce 4, 5, or 6 gold off of this without any kind of contest. And yeah, like Overzealous and Treasure Hunter are two like all-star 2-drops, and it really buttresses like Purple's early game in a way that I think is difficult to overstate. Up next, we have Ancient Warmonger, the first of the uncommon cards. 4 might for 5. It has Accelerate, so it can be like a 4 might Accelerate for 6 in a rune. And it has Assault equal to the number of enemy units here. So this card, I think, is functionally unplayable unless you want to play a very bad card. Like, you can play it. It's just incredibly overcosted for what it does. It has one reason, and it is punishing go-wide decks that have 1 might units, because it only gains 1 assault. So for example, this isn't good into Azir, because Azir's units are always going to be bigger. So if you're counting like number of units and you're getting 2 plus whatever gear they're wearing, the assault is functionally meaningless. This is really a card to punish Spectral Matron Vanguard decks, which is like some versions of Darius and mostly Victor. But there are no like go wide hole decks currently. If there are ever, this card is going to be like at best a sideboard. But I'm not a big fan of it, and it costs way too much. Like this needed, if this had like 6 might, it would be playable. Otherwise, I think this is like pretty brutally overcosted. Beast Below, 8 might for 7 energy and 2 runes. When you play me, return another friendly unit and an enemy unit to their owner's hands. No. Super high cost. 7 and 2 is not nothing. And I think the 2 might that it has over something like Raza is certainly not worth its cost. There's no like big might deck that I would want this in. If I'm playing like a sealed version that somehow has an Aurora, maybe. Like this is kind of like perhaps very cheap alternatives to very expensive cards for like MF Aurora. Otherwise, like don't play this. Yeah, it's just way too expensive. Boots of Swiftness, 3 might, 3 cost for 2 might, 1 equip, and it has ganking. So this is a piece of gear that I think you're going to see some amount in Irelia decks, especially where you need to give your 1 unit ganking. I was talking about like how do you get ganking onto Irelia earlier. This is one of the tools to do it. If you put this on Irelia or on like Purple Draven, you get to like move them around a lot, you get to score a lot, and especially with Purple Draven, you can close out games really fast. So I would say like Boots of Swiftness is good. It just needs some very specific homes. Yasuo also really likes this. Yasuo has sort of been kept behind, like having to play Windswept Hillock as I think it's Windswept Hillock as its catch-up battlefield to gank with units. I think like playing 1 or 2 copies of Boots of Swiftness is going to be super reasonable. Plus 2 might is good, and ganking is a super relevant keyword, and it's in the colors where you want to gank. So Purple Draven, Green Aurelia, Green Yasuo, and also, well, no, you're never going to play Purple Yasuo, but otherwise, like, this is a card that I really like, and yeah, reasonably high on it. Cull, 1 might for 1 cost, equip 1. When I conquer, play a gold gear token exhausted. I think it's fine. Its impact is just a bit low. I don't think I would ever give up a card slot for this, which is really like the main thing is not like this card is terrible. It's just that I would rather play a lot of different things that would allow me to conquer. And 1 might is often not enough to like fully break the math. This is, if anywhere, this is for Aurelia. But I'm not sure you would play like more than 1, and at that point I'm just like interested in playing different stuff. Factory Recall, 1 energy, action speed, return gear to its owner's hand. It's like functional purple gear hate. The problem is if it goes back to hand, it doesn't really deal with it. This is, reasonable slowdown against like seals, but many gear are gonna have like come into play effects, or they don't come into play exhausted. So for example, like the 2 gears that I first see using this the most on are like that I would want to not have on the board would be like Hook or Vanguard Armory. I think Aurora is going to be like reasonably lower in terms of representation in the next set. And both of those don't really get harmed by this. Aurora certainly doesn't, as it can just be recast the next turn. So I think Factory Recall is like not really a card that I would ever want to play. You can definitely like target equipment with it, and it punishes like Blade of the Ruined King in yellow, but I don't think that's a piece of gear that's really going to see that much play. So its applications are reasonably narrow, and it doesn't provide enough gain to be worth playing. Hard Bargain. 2 energy, it's reaction speed, and you can repeat it. Counter a spell unless its controller plays 2. I love this. It's a counter spell that's not in green. Obviously, if you're in green purple, you're just getting access to like way more counter magic this set. But this will be a reasonable threat in virtually every purple deck. If your opponent shows you that they ever have one of these, you're going to be forced to respect it for the rest of the set. I mean, like your 3-game set. And this will often just like snake under somebody's like costs. Unlike Magic, reminder that like spells are a type of card. They don't refer to everything, so you can't counter units with this, and so or gear, and so it has some limitations with what it can actually like deal with. But I would be happy playing 1 or 2 of these in a purple deck and siding a third one. And if the meta ever like becomes very spell heavy, if it's, like Draven runs a fair amount of spells that you can interact with profitably, Kaisa even more so. This doesn't have like limitations on the kinds of spells, which is super useful. And often people are playing spells on curve. So you can like snake under Acathian Rain or Time Warp reasonably well with this. I like Hard Bargain a lot. Any counter magic that breaks the limitation on which color gets to access it is inherently very good. It is arguably another one of the reasons why like purple is really coming out ahead in terms of commons and uncommons in this set, but certainly would recommend running Hard Bargain in most decks, really. Just a question of how many in terms of quantities. Up next, Harpoon Squad, 4 might for 4 energy. When I move to a battlefield, give me +2 this turn. From a battlefield, not to a battlefield. Nope, this is bad. It's effectively like blank when you need it to do anything, which is to push. It's only good if you give it ganking, which effectively makes this a card that needs other cards to even function properly. I think this card is awful. Happy to be proven wrong, as always, but I'm not feeling it. Windsinger, 1 might for 2. When you play me, return another unit at a battlefield with 3 or less to its owner's hand, and it has hidden. So there are a lot of cards that already move cards. Rebuke and Fight or Flight are already in that space. Now Overzealous Fan is also in that space. Windsinger is like a side grade. Its hits are more limited, and it's a gust that you can't play like at reaction speed if it's not hidden. So its limitations are pretty clear. This is for sure like a Teemo card, and because Teemo is struggling a little bit, it's probably like rated a bit lower. But I do think like Windsinger is a good unit. And I think you're going to be reasonably happy playing this a lot of the time. If you're ever like in a pre-release or a sealed event and you open a Windsingers, this card is going to like perform for you for sure. And it like it kills tokens, right? Because tokens disappear when they leave the battlefield. So if you're playing against Azir or you're playing against Victor, this card gets like a lot of value. Yeah, I like it reasonably well. It's just unfortunately like a little bit less good than Overzealous Fan or some of the other push effects that are already in the game. But if we're ever like in a situation where like Gust is unplayable because it's a spell and you need it to be a creature instead, this might just like take that spot. Edge of Night. Edge of Night is the other equipment that I wanted to talk about a little bit. So +2 might for 3 energy. It is hidden, and when you play it from face down, you can attach it to a unit you control. Edge of Night does see play a little bit in Aurelia lists, especially because you can effectively like play it for 0 runes and then accept that rune loss for +2, and that might allow you to even ready units. I think it's a bit of a dangerous card because there are so many like push out of battlefield effects coming out, but you can always react to them, right? It'll just force you to equip this to a unit that you already wanted to equip it to. I read this as like 0 and burn a rune to equip this to a unit, and I like that a lot. Evidently, this card is like crazy on Ember Monk because it gives you like a 4 might swing instantaneously. But otherwise, I would still like play this in a lot of purple decks that want to protect big units or want to win fights and are reasonably happy defending. But defending is inherently risky right now. Like, I need to like really stress that. Fizz. 3 might, 3 energy, 1 rune. When you play me, you may play a spell from your trash with energy cost no more than 3, ignoring the energy cost, and you recycle that spell after you play it, and you still need to pay the power cost. Fizz is great. Fizz is very close to a card called Snapcaster Mage in Magic. If you have played Magic, you probably have heard of that card and know that recurring spells is always good. Recurring removal is good, recurring card draw is good, recurring protection spells or counter magic is a bit less useful, especially because you have to play it when he enters the battlefield, which is the difference from just like putting it into your hand. But like if you are in Draven and you fight or flight an enemy and then you like play Fizz and fight or flight another person or like rebuke them, and you have to pay the power cost for sure, which is going to drain you colossally. But like this is just going to give you 3 additional pieces of removal with a body staple to them for like that 1 rune cost, which I think is great. And it effectively like lets you play any spell that costs 3 or less with no runes for free. Fizz is great. I think he's like intended to maybe be in Sivir or Ezreal, but I think he's just going to be like a staple of basically like non-Voltron strategies in purple. Voltron, by the way, is a term that does come from Magic in terms of like deck archetypes. It's a reference to an old cartoon from the 80s. I think it's called Galactic Defender Voltron that was remade on Netflix. It's like 5 robots that morph into a bigger robot to fight the enemies. So the idea is generally like you're just jamming a bunch of cards together to produce 1 giant unit. Sometimes it's called Boggle as well. You hear that. But yeah, you don't really like Fizz for that. You like him for like tricky spell decks, but those are really dominant right now. So you love him in Annie, and you probably love him in Draven as well. Irelia Graceful. Your spells that choose me cost 1 energy or 1 rune, 4 for 4, and burns a rune to play. Listen, I like Irelia Graceful. I think the problem is Irelia Graceful doesn't need an enormous amount of units, and you're more likely to prefer Green Aurelia in the champion zone because of Deflect, and the fact that she gets like consistent power bonuses. The cost is certainly nice, and if she is run into like the main list of an Aurelia deck, I wouldn't be surprised. But she's competing with cards like Treasure. Oh my god. Treasure Hunter, called Treasure Seeker in Runeterra, which is like messing me up. Treasure Hunter and Stellacorn Herder and Purple Draven that we'll talk about in a minute. So she's fine. She's just like Irelia is just honestly like spoiled for good units. So you are not playing. If you don't play this, it's mostly because you have better options, not because this card is terrible on its own. But you know that 1 cost is a bit expensive. Excuse me. Jane Medarda is up next. 5 might, 5 energy, 2 purple runes. When you choose me with a spell, draw 1. It's not good, man. 5 for 5 is fine, but the 2 energy cost is pretty prohibitive, and you have to choose them with spells to draw. Most of your spells are already drawing. I'm not like a fan. If you're in like green purple, which is the archetype they want to choose your cards with, you're already playing like Disciplines. You're probably playing at Dreaming Tree. You can play like Called Shots on the side. I'm just like not feeling it all that much. if there's ever a deck that can like really abuse that clause, maybe Jay becomes like the core of a combo deck. But currently I wouldn't play him, that's for sure. Next up we have Sivir Mercenary. So 4 might for 4 energy and 1 purple rune, accelerate, and if you spend at least 2 energy or 2 runes this turn, I have +2 in ganking. This card is like super weird. So evidently, if you're playing this with the accelerate, she becomes a 6 might with ready, which is not awful. But the ganking is strange because you will have to effectively ready her. So she's actually like not that much for Sivir. She is more for Irelia as a unit for you to choose, to ready, and then to utilize that ganking to push into a different field. The problem is every time I look at this card for that like kind of deck, I would rather just play the boots and equip them to a different unit that can wear them better. This unit is a bit too small to like be really threatening and doesn't really provide anything other than like the 1 turn accelerate, which purple is a little bit less high on than like red is. She's fine. I think if you're playing Sivir, she's probably your chosen champ compared to Orange Sivir, just because she is way cheaper to play and provides accelerate, which always lets you threaten battlefields. But I am not super in on it. Obviously, the other thing you can do is the turn after you've played her, if you've moved her to a battlefield and the opponent's sitting on the other one, you can play Punch first. She'll get like +6 and ganking, and she'll just be like ginormous. But I'm just like that is what you want to do with this, but I'm not super impressed by how many runes you have to spend to do that. Spirit Wheel, 2 energy, and when you choose a friendly unit, you may pay 1 and exhaust this to draw 1, so you can use it once a turn. In Aurelia, I wouldn't be surprised if Spirit Wheel was played as a 1-of. I think anywhere else, paying that additional 1 is pretty challenging, especially if you're thinking about like what decks play purple. Like you're not often choosing your own units in purple red, for example, so Annie and Jinx don't really like get much value out of this. Draven is drawing enough that I don't think he cares to like take this over a removal spell, so it really is for like Aurelia and Yasuo, and you're going to be happy to pay the like to draw, but it is a big cost, and I think double drawing this card is pretty awful. You also only get to draw 1 during your turn or the opponent's turn. So, you know, it's mediocre, but it may see some fringe play. Switcheroo, 2 energy and 2 runes. It's hidden, it's action speed, or you can hide it, but it's action speed by default, and it swaps the mites of 2 units at the same battlefield this turn. Them printing this in the same set as Draven is borderline crazy to me. This card effectively reads like counterspell 3 or 4 like pump spells. This busts Blood Rush and Cleave. It makes your like 1 cost defend against like Cleave Darius's. It breaks Vi Ride the Wind. It's like necessary to be. This is a card that you will have to play for mirrors if you are in purple almost consistently. It does get countered by push effects that can remove your unit, but if they're pushing into you and you play Switcheroo and they have to push you out, they've committed like multiple cards. I think Switcheroo is like an amazing card. You probably like it in Sivir because you can refund some of its cost. But I think this is like a 1-of in basically like every purple deck, and it is like a super scary, unpredictable out that can just like invert combat after many cards have been played. Those kinds of cards are always like super strange because they either read as a 1-for-1 if you play them early, but they can sometimes read as like a 1-for-4 or a 1-for-5 if a lot of cards are committed to the same thing. Yeah, I think this card is crazy. The fact that it's hidden is virtually, it is important because sometimes you get to like shortcut that 2 rune cost, but even if somebody's not hiding this, which I honestly like, I think hiding this and giving the information is worse than just holding it in hand, except if you're Teemo. Crazy ass card. Can't believe they printed this. Vex, Cheerless. So 5 might for 5 and 1 rune. When I'm in combat, friendly spells cost 1 energy and 1 rune less to a minimum of 1 energy, and enemy spells cost 1 more. So this is like a Grand Abolisher Junior effect for people who played Magic. Taxing opponents' spells is incredibly useful. This card is pretty brutal in certain matchups and kind of doesn't do much outside of that. And so it'll often read like a 5 might vanilla for 5 and 5. She's not in combat most of the time, and I think when she is in combat, like against Draven, for example, they might accept to pay the additional cost to just like push her back or to debuff her. And outside of combat, like she's in that zone of like still dies to Falling Star, still dies to like Singularity, and most other effects that will like hit her in base or them. I actually don't know Vex as a character all that much. Um, I like this kind of effect, and this is the kind of effect that like wears equipment very well, and if you can sit at a battlefield, it can get like really annoying. Um, Unfortunately, I think there's like too many ways to just like not care too much about that cost currently. But this is the kind of card that I would keep an eye on for like coming sets, especially because Vex is getting a champion unit or like a legend next set. And if this is something that you can reliably access and build around, things might get very different for sure. Downwell for 8 energy and 2 runes, return all units and gears to owner's hands. Oh god. Okay, do you ever want to play this in purple decks currently? So you maybe want to play this in Annie on your turn, so you can start like playing sneaky deckhands and stuff. Otherwise, this is maybe like an Aurora card. 8 and 2 is pretty brutal, and you're putting things back in hand. You're not even like getting rid of them. There's a lot of accelerate. Doomwell is like a quintessential board wipe, and I think its existence is probably important for the game. I just can't tell right now how good it is, given that like this effectively is like a tool to break massive holds. Like this hammers um, orange set, but otherwise not orange set, like yellow set or like mega hold strats, but nothing else really. Then we have Draven. Uh, Draven Audacious. 6 might for 6 energy and 1 rune. Draven has Deflect. The first time I win a combat each turn, you score a point. Whenever he dies in combat, you choose an opponent, they score a point. So he has to actually die in combat to give them the point. It's not just that you lose. So if you like back him up, you don't give out the point, and you can like score so many points off of him. So for example, you push him into a battlefield, you score, you ride him into the different battlefield, and then you've automatically like you won the first comp. Let's say there's a unit anywhere in either of those battlefields that you can win against. You're scoring 3 points. The opponent has to like get him off whatever battlefield he's on, or he's going to hold for a 4th point. But if they somehow commit into you and you beat them out, you score another point. Like side like point conditions are relatively rare, and I think Draven's is probably the most consistent out of Yasuo, Tryndamere, and Ahri, because he rewards you for conquering and for defending properly, not just for holding or conquering under certain circumstances. He's great. His champion is good and wants you to do this already. I don't think like he's exactly the champion for that, but I actually think he's the unit that Aurelia wants. Like this is the unit that you protect with a bunch of equipment and a bunch of spells, and you make your opponent fight him, and then you punish them every time they like miss the chance to do so. The only issue is sometimes your protection is going to have to be like very specific around him for things like Cull the Weak in yellow, or for like specific units that are just big and are running into him. So I suspect that Draven Audacious is going to be like played in green purple decks mostly, where protecting him is your win con, and him having deflect is a pretty good indication of that. Um, and outside of that, I think he's going to be a bit more rare. But this card is like the bomb. I love this card. I love what it's trying to do. I love alternate like point counting systems. Note that that point happens on combat wins, so we would have to check. I'm reasonably sure that he actually scores the point after the actual conquest happens, so that he can actually score your 8th point off cycle, which is like really scary for opponents that have to get through him, but aren't sure if they have the gas to do so. Yeah, he's great. He has like a narrow deck that he wants to be in, but he's pretty great in that deck. Ezreal Prodigy. This is the other Ezreal. When I was doing blue legends, blue champion units, I think I talked about, like, this is the one that I like. 3 might, 3 energy, 1 rune cost. When you play him, discard 1, draw 2, just straight up, and optional costs cost 1 energy or 1 rune less. So obviously repeats, but sometimes there will be like additional cost that you can pay with Ezreal's ability. I think he's just fantastic. He's a unit that draws you 2 cards, discards your worst card. Purple already likes discarding for cards like Raza, and it will synergize with the next card that we're going to talk about in Raza. I think Ezreal, like, this is the Ezreal that you want to play in the champ zone if you are playing Ezreal, and I think this Ezreal is also like something that you really want to play if you're in Draven. He's small and he draws you tricks to protect him. I just really like him, and he's one of those like cheap all-around units that you're going to be happy to play. Obviously, 1 rune on a 3-drop is always a bit awkward because it's early, but I think drawing 2 and discarding like your worst card in hand is fantastic. Then we have Last Rites, which is the final card in purple. Gear, +2 might for 3 and an equip cost of 1 and recycling 2 cards from your trash. When I conquer or hold, you may play a unit from your trash. There's like a super turbo Raza deck where you can effectively like play cards like Ezreal, play Gumbo, the merchant in purple, and just like cycle your cards really aggressively and jam Raza in your graveyard for 0. And then whatever you're conquering lets you play Raza, so you're gonna like be happy to play that card really fast. I think this card is like reasonable, and I think the more reanimation targets pop up throughout the game, the better it will get. Especially if there are cards that like have very like weird ways to discount their cost that you can like interact profitably with. So for example, like Ezreal Prodigy and Last Rites interact together, and they interact with Raza, a card that is already played in purple, and they interact with like decks that like discarding and drawing a lot. So for example, like Teemo might like Ezreal and Last Rites as well. I think these are like very good all-purpose cards. Ezreal, just like if you get copies, probably keep them. Very likely that he'll end up in Draven. Last Rites I think is a bit more narrow, but is pretty cool as well. And then last up, I always cover these in case people aren't like looking at the other color videos. I want to talk about the signature spells. So Spinning Axe. Spinning Axe is actually one of the cards that I got the most wrong in my original red review. So 2 energy and Rainbow Rune, for your deck, right? It has Quick Draw, so you can play it at reaction speed and auto equips, and it gives +3. And it has Temporary. If unattached, it dies at the start of your next beginning phase before scoring. So Spinning Axe is a permanent +3 combat trick that you have to kill the unit that it's on to remove, and you could theoretically like hook it with the card that is in red back to a unit, like the one that attaches again. But realistically, like I'm just happy playing this as like a permanent 3-cost combat trick in Draven. I think this is like a 3 of in the deck for sure. Sometimes you're going to set these on different units. Sometimes you're going to set them on the same unit. They're good on offense. They're good on defense. They're good against removal spells. Except for like hard kills, which is only in yellow. And that's like Draven's only bad matchup, which this card does nothing for or against. It's as good as other combat tricks. Spinning Axe is great. It's like the kind of card that has like no bad side for me. Like, sure, it's a temporary gear, but if you think about it less as a gear that dies and more as a spell that sticks around, I think it becomes pretty clear that this card is really good. And often, if you are in the situations where you are going to play it, it will like refund its draw because you will win the combat anyways. So with that in mind, I think like Spinning Axe is all-star. I think you run like 2. I think I would just run 3 of in every Draven deck until somebody convinces me that that is wrong. But otherwise, like, this card is great, and its equip cost, you're almost like never going to actually have to pay it because of the quick draw. So yeah. Amazing card. Up next, we have Aurelia's Defiant Dance, another card that is just like a straight up 3 of. So 1 energy and rainbow, reaction speed, +2, -2 to a unit. Obviously, if you're playing like green Aurelia, you get like +3, -2. This card swings like 4 power for 1 energy. If you're playing it on purple Aurelia, you get to either discount the rune cost and play this for 1, or in some really annoying situations for your opponent, you are going to pay the rune cost, but you're going to pay it for 0. So your opponent's going to assume that you're tapped out, and you're actually going to be swinging on a 4 power swing. For anybody who's ever run into a location where Teemo flipped up, and you noticed how much of a difference 4 is, this card is really brutal. You can also react to removal with it and protect a unit for like the turn and still give like -2, basically like neutering an attack. I think Defiant Dance is great. It effectively has like one downside, which is it costs a rune, but otherwise it is like far superior on guard, which is already a card that's played in like 3 ofs. Like, there is no Irelia deck that I wouldn't run 3 of Defiant Dance in, for sure. Arcane Shift, 3 energy and either rune, action speed, and this is the banish a friendly unit. Then you get to play it again, or the owner does. If you're in multiplayer, it might be somebody else, ignoring its cost, and then you deal 3 damage to a unit at a battlefield and you banish this. So this card is not recurable because it banishes, and it requires you to have both targets that are viable for it to like, or you have to like target your unit for it to do the other costs, or the other side of the effect. I think Arcane Shift is fine. It's not as good as I originally thought it was, mostly because of how the meta is shaping up. And there's a lot of like removal, there's a lot of bounce back to hand that Arcane Shift can get broken by. I think there will still be like matches where you will see somebody Arcane Shifting like Mind Splitters back to back and just absolutely kicking your ass. But otherwise, I think this card is fine. And unfortunately, I think it start like it is really good, and purple Ezreal is very good, but I think like Ezreal, like the Ezreal legend, I think is just not sufficiently strong right now to warrant you like going into the stack. In Ezreal, you do probably run like 2 of these, or at least or 3, and it is like one of the main reasons why you would be in that deck. And it allows like blue and purple to deal damage at action speed with spells, which is not something that they get to access a lot normally. And then lastly, we have On the Hunt, 1 energy, 2 runes, ready all your units. I think I was like pretty down on this card when I did the orange set review last week, and I think I'm like even worse on it now. This is like a sideboard 1 of, and otherwise like never play this. It's just too expensive. You would only play this on like a super final turn, and that's against like some greedy decks, and I think that's it. Just like don't bother. That's my take. Okay, so back to the presentation really quickly. So you may notice that the Spiritforged Chaos cards, I'm generally a lot higher on overall. I think like purple is the color that got the most gas out of the new set, especially at common. Cards like Treasure Seeker or Treasure Hunter, Overzealous Fan, Called Shot are all incredible. The ganking boots are good. Purple Draven's crazy. Purple Ezreal's really good. Last Rites is good. Like they just got like a lot of good stuff across the board. I'm gonna talk about personal faves very quickly because you can probably guess what they are. So yeah, Treasure Hunter and Overzealous Fan I talked about. I think these are just going like in every one of my purple green decks. Like it's probably like these and the Merchant for like the remainder of however long I'm playing those. Maybe Tidehunter fights with Overzealous Fan in like Yasuo, but I probably would play like 3 Hunters, 3 Overzealous Fan, 3 Tidehunters, and like 1 Merchant and have 10 1-drops and enjoy my life. These are like amazing cards, and it's made, I think, purple a much more consistent color. Hard Bargain, one of the big new additions, offers counter magic to purple. Obviously, you love this card if you're in Aurora and you have like some stuff that you want to counter, but I think reasonably you can expect to see this in a lot of decks if spells are even remotely playable. And right now, 39 spell victor, which is turning into like a little bit less than 39 spell victor, but still like 35 spell victor, gets hit by hard bargain pretty hard. And I think that's like the tech that Draven needs to not like crumble against that deck. But if you're in purple and you're not Draven, then you're probably going to want this card as well. And obviously it synergizes super well with Annie. You can like play out your whole resource base for the turn, and then you get to ready 2 at the end of the turn, and you're sitting on hard bargain for the rest of the game. So yeah, great stuff. And then lastly, Draven Audacious, which I think is one of like my favorite cards in the set overall. I think people are either going to love or hate this card. Alternative win conditions are always controversial in card games because they kind of break the way that the game works by itself. This card can like win at times when you wouldn't normally be able to win the game, and it accelerates the clock significantly against controlling decks. So for that reason, I think Draven Audacious is really good. And his win condition, like his positive condition, is like much easier to pull off than his punishment because you only need to win, which happens, as we talked about with the Draven Legend, whenever you are, like taking a battlefield, even if like you didn't kill a unit or anything, whenever you take it during a combat. So, you get that effect from things like Fight or Flight or Rebuke, but your opponent doesn't. So they have to kill him, and because he's already on Deflect, it'll get like much harder to fight him. In red, I think you can protect him a little bit less reliably, but I think in green purple, so in Aurelia, he becomes like an absolute menace where you can just hide him behind an enormous amount of counter magic and pump spells and just make him like really big and force your opponent to try to take him out. And if they can't, you'll score even more points. So I think these 4 cards are like really where it's at for me, and they're making me reconsider my Yasuo builds pretty consistently, which is, a sign that like I might be swapping into Aurelia once the new set comes out, but it also depends on what I open. Yeah, these cards are my favorites. I think by far of the 6 colors, purple is the big winner. If you are a purple enjoyer, your time has come. But also, I'm sorry for your wallets, because if purple is on top, then a lot of the purple rares and epics are going to be very expensive to get a hold of. So it is what it is. Yeah, I mean, that's really like the theme of this. Oh, I forgot to talk about Fizz. And listen, I'm not in on Sivir right now, and I think a lot of pro players aren't, but she is putting up some numbers in China and also in the Rift and Runes event. So, keep an eye on that. And then for the next video on Wednesday, I'm finally going to be covering Kai'Sa. I think we're towards the end of the season. There's been a lot of Kai'Sa discussions, but it's pretty clear that Kai'Sa is still going to be sticking around somewhat. And I think there's going to be some changes to Kai'Sa. So this video might be a bit different, where it's actually going to be starting to incorporate some of the Spiritforged information. And I figured it was time, because we are like in 2026 and there's like some changes to discuss, which is more interesting to me than just like rehashing all of our winning deck lists. Yeah, I guess that's it for today. Hopefully this one was useful, and if you're excited for Chaos Cards, then this one was probably fun to look at and to see all the stuff that's going to be great for you. Once again, Happy New Year, and I will see you on Wednesday.